Find somewhere comfortable. Let the weight of the day begin to leave the body. There is a place high above the tree line where the air is cold and thin and completely still, and where the only thing moving is a shape that is not quite a bird and not quite a piece of the sky, but something between the two, something that belongs to a dimension of the world that the ground never touches. The shape turns in a slow circle without a single wing beat, rising on the thermal that the warming rock face below it is generating, and from this height it can see 40 square kilometers of mountain slope and river valley and forest canopy all at once, in detail that no human eye at any height has ever matched. That is an eagle. That is where we begin. Let the image of it carry you upward for a moment before it carries you down. Subscribe right now and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Hit that button. It costs you nothing and it keeps this channel going. Drop a comment telling us where in the world you are watching from and what time it is. We read every single one. The eagle is not a single species. It is an organizational category that the human mind has imposed on approximately 68 species of large diurnal raptors distributed across every continent except Antarctica, united by the combination of large size, powerful talons, hooked beak, and the kind of aerial capability that has made them symbols of power and freedom and transcendence in the cultures of every human civilization that has lived within their range. The bald eagle appears on the seal of the United States. The golden eagle was the emblem of the Roman legions. The martial eagle and the African fish eagle appear on the flags of multiple African nations. The Philippine eagle is the national bird of the Philippines. Across 6,000 years of recorded human culture, the eagle has meant something. Something about the relationship between the earth and the sky, between limitation and freedom, between what the body is capable of and what the spirit aspires to. The biology is even more interesting than the symbol. The eye of the golden eagle contains 1 million photoreceptors per square millimeter of retinal surface. The human eye contains approximately 200,000. The eagle's visual acuity, the ability to resolve fine detail at distance, is 4 to 8 times greater than the human's, depending on the species and the conditions of measurement. An eagle, circling at 300 meters altitude, can resolve a rabbit at a distance of approximately 2 kilometers, not detect its presence, resolve it, distinguish its individual shape, its movement pattern, the way its fur lies along its body. The eye of the eagle is not a more sensitive version of the human eye. It is a different instrument entirely, operating at a resolution that the human visual system cannot conceptually appreciate because we have never experienced what it is like to see the world at that resolution. The fovea, the region of highest receptor density in the eye, exists in 2 forms in most eagle species: a shallow fovea for wide-field peripheral vision and a deep fovea for high-resolution central targeting. The deep fovea is a pit in the retinal surface whose geometry concentrates light onto the highest density receptor region through a combination of the pit's optical properties and the arrangement of the receptors at its base. When the eagle locks its gaze on a target, the image of that target falls on the deep fovea, and the resolution available at that point is the resolution that the hunting strike requires, the precise location of the prey's head, the direction of its movement, the moment when the trajectory of the eagle's dive and the trajectory of the prey's movement will intersect. The dive is called a stoop, and it is one of the fastest movements of any animal on Earth. The peregrine falcon holds the documented speed record for a stoop, approximately 390 kilometers per hour in the steepest recorded dives. But the large eagles produce stoops that, while lower in absolute speed, represent a different engineering challenge, delivering the impact force of a large body in controlled flight at high velocity to a precise target without losing the bird in the process. The golden eagle's stoop reaches approximately 240 to 300 kilometers per hour. The harpy eagle, which hunts in the dense forest canopy of the Amazon and does not use the open-air vertical dive, achieves lower speeds but in a 3-dimensional maneuvering environment whose complexity no open-air stoop produces. The Steller's sea eagle, one of the heaviest eagles on Earth at approximately 9 kilograms, is not a high-speed diver, but a power hunter. It takes prey through the application of talon force rather than the kinetic energy of the dive. Let the image of the stoop settle into wherever the mind goes when it releases the need to hold the day's details. A shape in the sky far above, the slow circle the moment of recognition, and then the fold, the wings drawing in, the body elongating into the teardrop profile that reduces drag to its minimum, and the fall that is not a fall, but a controlled commitment to a geometry whose solution takes a fraction of a second to compute and a fraction of a second to execute at 300 kilometers per hour in an atmosphere that the bird reads through a sensory system whose sensitivity to pressure, temperature, and airspeed makes the modern aircraft's instrument panel look blunt by comparison. The talons are the terminal point of the stoop, and the force they deliver has been measured in the research on raptor strike mechanics at levels that explain why the prey rarely survives the initial impact, regardless of whether the talon penetration itself is immediately lethal. The golden eagle's talons grip with a force of approximately 400 pounds per square inch, comparable to a large crocodile bite in terms of pressure, but applied through the narrow cross-section of 4 curved, hardened keratin points, whose penetration into the prey's tissues is concentrated at those points rather than distributed across a broader surface. The talon of the harpy eagle, whose prey includes the spider monkeys and the two-toed sloths of the Amazon canopy, reaches lengths of up to 10 centimeters in the hind talon, the hallux, which is the primary killing implement, and delivers a grip force sufficient to fracture the bones of an adult monkey's skull in the initial contact. The eagle does not see prey as we see objects. It sees movement first, because the eagle's visual system, like most avian visual systems, is tuned to the detection of movement across the wide peripheral field before the high-resolution central targeting system is engaged. A stationary rabbit in open ground is harder for an eagle to detect than a running rabbit at the same distance, because the stationary rabbit produces no movement signal in the eagle's wide-field peripheral processing. The rabbit that freezes when it detects an aerial threat is using a behavioral strategy that partially exploits this aspect of the eagle's visual processing. Partial, because the high-resolution central fovea, once directed at a stationary target, can resolve it at the distances and the resolution described earlier, rendering the freeze response effective only if the eagle has not yet targeted the individual. The eagle knows this, not in the cognitive sense of knowing, but in the behavioral sense of the predator that has been solving exactly this problem for millions of years and whose hunting behavior reflects the accumulated solution. The high circle that surveys the landscape below for movement, the directed observation that follows any movement detected, the repositioning that places the eagle in the optimal approach angle before the committed dive, and the exploitation of terrain, approaching from the direction of the sun, using the ridgeline to mask the approach, maintaining altitude until the geometry of the stoop is favorable. The eagle hunts with a tactical awareness of the physical environment that the research on raptor hunting behavior has characterized in enough detail to reveal its sophistication. The nest of the golden eagle is one of the most permanent structures in the natural world. Eagles return to the same nest site for decades, adding material to the existing structure each breeding season, until some nests reach dimensions 3 meters across, 6 meters deep, and masses exceeding a ton, that make them the largest bird-built structures in the world. The oldest documented active golden eagle nests have been in continuous use for more than 30 years, and the structural accumulation of those decades is visible in the layered additions of sticks and branches and the lining materials, grasses, feathers, green vegetation brought to the nest during the breeding season, in a behavior whose function in reducing parasite loads in the nest has been proposed but not definitively established. The chick that hatches in this nest hatches at the apex of a landscape. Below it is the territory that its parents defend, a range that may span 50 to 100 square kilometers for a golden eagle pair in productive habitat. And everything within that range is potential food, from the mountain hares and the ground squirrels that the eagle takes most frequently to the young deer and the mountain goats that the eagle can knock from a cliff face in the steep terrain of its preferred hunting environment. The chick does not yet know any of this. It knows the interior of the nest, the sound of the parent's wing beats on approach, the presentation of food, and the warmth of the parent's body in the cold of the mountain night. That is enough for now. Let that simplicity be a model for what the mind needs at this hour. The nest is enough. The warmth is enough. The sound of the breathing in the dark is enough. The chick grows quickly. By the time it is 12 weeks old, it is nearly the size of its parents, but it does not yet fly. The development of the flight musculature takes longer than the skeletal growth, and the coordination of the wing movements that soaring flight requires, the constant micro-adjustments to the wing surface that maintain the angle of attack in the shifting thermals, is a skill that the fledging process develops through weeks of progressive practice. The eaglet that makes its first flight from the nest edge does not fly the way its parents fly. It makes the series of controlled falls and recoveries and short sustained glides that the nervous system can manage at this stage of its development, and each day of practice produces a capability whose endpoint, months later, is the smooth, effortless soaring that makes the adult eagle appear to belong to the air in a way that nothing earthbound can match. The effortlessness is not effortless. It is the product of a physical system whose every component has been refined over millions of years of selection for exactly this performance, maintained by the constant physiological investment of an animal whose metabolism in active flight is 10 to 20 times its resting metabolic rate. The eagle that is soaring in apparent ease is an eagle that is working, adjusting its primary feathers to control the airflow over the wing surface, shifting its tail to steer, monitoring the thermal column for the boundaries where the rising air gives way to the descending air, and the circle must be repositioned. The ease is real, but it is the ease of mastery, not the ease of absence of effort. There is something in this that the mind can hold at the end of a day whose efforts have finally been completed. The ease that comes after mastery is a different ease from the ease that comes before any effort at all. The body that has worked through the day and is now permitted to rest is a body resting in the quality of the end of sustained effort, and this rest has a depth that the rest of the unexerted body does not find as easily. The eagle that returns to the nest in the late afternoon and folds its wings and lowers its head onto the chest, in the posture of the resting raptor, is an animal whose body has earned the stillness it is returning to. Your body has earned the stillness too. The eagle, species of the world-span environments from the open Arctic tundra to the dense tropical rainforest, from the high mountain ranges to the coastal wetlands, and each environment has shaped the eagle that lives in it in ways whose precision illuminates the general principles of raptor evolution. The bald eagle, whose primary prey is fish, has evolved feet whose undersurface is covered in spicules, small sharp projections that increase the friction between the foot and the wet, slippery surface of a fish, and whose talon proportions are optimized for the grip that must hold a large, struggling fish during the brief contact of the fishing strike. The harpy eagle, whose primary prey is arboreal mammals in the closed canopy of the Amazon, has evolved short, broad wings whose low aspect ratio allows the rapid maneuvering in the dense canopy that the long wings of the soaring eagles cannot manage in the same environment. The Philippine eagle, one of the largest eagles by total length, has evolved in the island ecosystem of the Philippines in isolation from the large mammalian predators that dominate the same ecological niche on the mainland, and has become the apex predator of an island ecosystem whose prey community includes the flying lemurs whose skin folds allow them to glide between trees, and whose gliding makes them vulnerable to the aerial predator that the Philippine eagle is. The migration of the eagles that migrate, not all species do, many are year-round residents of their territories, is one of the most watched and most celebrated events in the bird-watching calendar across the Northern Hemisphere. The concentration of raptors at the bottleneck points where land narrows and the sea crossing is shortest, such as the Strait of Gibraltar, the Bosphorus, and the ridge of the Appalachian Mountains, produces aggregations of thousands of migrating hawks and eagles that the hawkwatch tradition has been counting and documenting for decades. The golden eagle that migrates from its breeding territory in northern Canada to its wintering range in the American Southwest covers thousands of kilometers in the autumn migration, navigating by the sun compass and the magnetic field and the topographic landmarks of the mountain ridges that the migration route follows, arriving at a wintering territory whose location it has visited in previous years and whose resources it knows. The navigation is not mysterious to the eagle. It is what the eagle does, as naturally as the giraffe browses or the whale dives. The mystery is in the human observation of it, the recognition that an animal whose brain weighs less than 50 grams is performing a navigational computation, whose equivalent in human engineering requires GPS satellites and digital mapping and computational resources that fill rooms. The eagle carries the map in its nervous system, updated by experience and maintained by the same sensory inputs that guide every decision it makes from the moment it leaves the nest to the moment it folds its wings on the winter perch and waits for the return of the light that will tell it to begin the journey back. The perch in the winter evening is where we leave the eagle tonight. The sun has gone below the ridge. The air temperature is dropping fast in the way of mountain evenings, where the thin atmosphere has no capacity to hold the day's warmth after the sun disappears. The eagle is on a dead pine at the edge of a cliff face, its feathers slightly fluffed against the cold, its head rotating in the slow, precise way of a bird that is still monitoring the landscape, but at a lower intensity than the active hunting mode of the afternoon. The talons grip the branch with the same force that the stoop delivers to the prey, a grip whose locking mechanism, the tendons that run along the back of the leg and automatically tighten the talon curl when the leg is extended, holds the bird on the perch without active muscular effort, so that the eagle can sleep on a branch in a high wind without the risk of falling. The nictitating membrane, the translucent third eyelid that sweeps across the eagle's eye from the inner corner, closes over the eye in the first stage of sleep. The outer eyelids follow. The head lowers toward the chest. The breathing slows. Somewhere far below on the valley floor, a rabbit is moving through the evening grass, its ears rotating, its eyes scanning the sky for the shape that is not there anymore. The eagle is asleep. The mountain is quiet. Your breathing has slowed in the way that the body knows how to do without direction, the way the eagle's talons grip the perch without active effort, automatically, as the system settles into the mode it was made for. Let the nictitating membrane close over the awareness of the day. Let the outer awareness follow. Let the head settle toward the chest. The ridge is dark against the sky. The first stars are out. The air is cold and still and completely clear, and from the eagle's perch the world is visible in all directions. 40 square kilometers of mountain and valley and river and forest, dark and quiet and at rest. Everything at rest. You at rest. The eagle holds the branch in the dark. The night holds everything else. Let go of holding. Let it carry you. The feather is the engineering marvel that makes all of this possible, and its structure rewards a moment of attention before the attention dissolves into the dark. Each primary flight feather of an eagle, the long outer feathers whose individual movement controls the fine aerodynamics of the wing, is composed of a central shaft, the rachis, from which branch approximately 1 million individual barbules on each side, each barbule equipped with microscopic hooks that interlock with the barbules of adjacent feathers to form a surface whose aerodynamic properties approach those of a rigid aerofoil while maintaining the flexibility that allows the feather to deform slightly under load and return to shape when the load is released. The result is a structural material that is simultaneously rigid enough to support the aerodynamic forces of high-speed flight and flexible enough to avoid fracture under the same forces. Human engineers have been studying the structural properties of bird feathers for decades and have not produced a synthetic material that replicates all of their properties simultaneously. The primary feathers of soaring eagles are slotted at the tips. The outer primaries are separated from each other at the wingtip, creating individual feather slots through which air flows in a pattern that reduces the induced drag generated at the wingtip during soaring flight. Induced drag is the drag produced by the pressure difference between the upper and lower surfaces of a lifting wing, which causes air to flow around the wingtip from the high-pressure underside to the low-pressure upper surface, creating a vortex that extracts energy from the aircraft. The slotted wingtip of the soaring eagle reduces this vortex by breaking the continuous pressure differential into multiple smaller differentials across the individual slotted feathers, and the energy savings that this drag reduction produces across the hours of daily soaring flight are a significant fraction of the eagle's daily energy budget. Modern aircraft winglets, the upturned tips visible on the wings of commercial airliners, exploit the same principle that the eagle's slotted primaries have been using since before the first aircraft was built. The territory that the eagle defends is not merely a feeding ground. It is a cognitive map, an internalized representation of the landscape whose features, resources, and hazards the eagle knows in the detail that only years of continuous ranging can produce. The research on golden eagle space use has found that individuals show strong site fidelity within their territories, returning to the same hunting perches, the same thermal launch sites, the same prey-rich areas in the same seasonal sequence year after year. This consistency is not habit in the simple sense. It reflects the accumulated knowledge of which areas produce prey, at which times and under which weather conditions, a knowledge base whose depth the eagle builds across the years of its long life. The golden eagle's lifespan in the wild can exceed 30 years, and the territorial knowledge that an old eagle carries, the precise topography of the thermals that form along the mountain ridges, the areas where the ground squirrels emerge first after winter, the approach angles that exploit the sun and the terrain to minimize the prey's detection window, is knowledge that cannot be transmitted and is lost when the individual dies. The eagle pair that has held a territory for 20 years is a pair that has optimized the use of that territory across 2 decades of learning, and the productivity of the territory for that pair substantially exceeds the productivity that a naive pair would find in the same area. The territory is not just a space. It is a relationship between the birds and the landscape, built across years of the birds learning what the landscape offers and the landscape shaping which birds survive in it. The fish eagle's cry is the sound of the African waterway, a long descending call whose carrying power and whose association with rivers, lakes, and the wide floodplains of sub-Saharan Africa have made it one of the most recognized bird calls in the world, and one of the most frequently used in the soundtracks of films and documentaries set anywhere in Africa, regardless of whether the African fish eagle actually inhabits the ecosystem being depicted. The call carries across a kilometer of open water, and its function is territorial advertisement, a broadcast of presence and claim whose acoustic properties are those of a signal designed to travel across the flat, reflective surface of water with the minimum of atmospheric interference. The fish eagle hunts from a perch at the waterside or in a low circle above the water surface, scanning the shallow areas where the fish are most visible from above. When a fish is detected near the surface, the eagle drops to the water in a shallow dive. Not the steep stoop of the golden eagle, but a controlled descent that ends with the feet entering the water first, the talons gripping the fish in the split second of contact, and the powerful wing beats that pull the eagle and its catch back into the air. The catch is rarely deeply submerged. The fish eagle targets fish within approximately 30 centimeters of the surface, where the optical distortion of the water-air interface that complicates all aerial predation of aquatic prey is minimized by the fish's proximity to the surface. A fish at depth, seen through a water surface that is refracting the light between the eagle's eye and the fish, appears to be in a different location than it actually is, and the eagle's striking accuracy depends on minimizing this parallax error by targeting fish that are close enough to the surface that the refraction effect is small. The sleep of birds is unlike the sleep of mammals in ways that the comparative sleep research has found to be among the most interesting discoveries in the neuroscience of sleep across vertebrate species. Birds sleep with half their brain at a time. The phenomenon, called unihemispheric slow-wave sleep, allows one cerebral hemisphere to enter the slow-wave sleep state while the other hemisphere remains awake and aware, controlling the eye that is open, the eye on the side of the awake hemisphere, to monitor the environment for threats. The bird on a perch can sleep in this state with one eye open, processing the visual information from that eye through the awake hemisphere, and then alternate which hemisphere is sleeping at intervals throughout the rest period. The eagle on the perch tonight is sleeping in this way, one hemisphere resting, one watching, one eye closed, one open. The open eye sweeps slowly across the darkened valley below, registering the movement of small things and the absence of movement of threats. The sleeping hemisphere is in the slow wave state, whose function, memory consolidation, neural maintenance, the biological processes that make sleep necessary, is proceeding at its own pace in the half of the brain that the eagle has given over to rest. The bird is simultaneously asleep and awake, resting and watching, letting go and holding on. The two states coexist in the same body in the same moment, which is the extraordinary thing. The resolution of a problem that the open landscape makes for every animal that must rest but cannot afford to be fully unaware. You do not need to solve this problem tonight. The space you are in is safe enough to let both hemispheres rest. Let the watching stop. Let the open eye close. Let the whole brain find the stillness that the eagle only ever finds in halves. The eagle pair mates for life in most species, a pair bond whose duration can span the full 30 or more years of the bird's adult lives, maintained across the seasons when the pair is together at the nest, and across the months when the migratory species separate for the winter and return to the same territory in the spring. The maintenance of the pair bond across long separations and across the years, whose accumulation represents the full productive life of the individuals, is accomplished through the behavioral rituals of the breeding season. The aerial displays in which the pair soars together, the talon grappling that the research has documented as one of the most dramatic courtship behaviors in the raptor world, and the cooperative maintenance of the nest site that binds the pair to a shared physical place across the years. The talon grappling display, in which the two birds lock their talons together in mid-air and tumble in a cartwheel fall, separating only when the ground approaches, is a behavior whose function the research has debated. The pair bond maintenance hypothesis, the territory display hypothesis, and the skill assessment hypothesis have all been proposed to explain why two birds that have mated for life engage in what appears to be a controlled mutual attack. The most compelling interpretation is that the display is honest information about the individual's aerial capability, a performance that only a bird in excellent condition can execute safely, and that the partner's willingness to engage in it is an ongoing assessment of the other's quality as a hunting and territorial partner. The bond is maintained not by the simple passage of time, but by the repeated demonstration that both partners are still capable of the excellence that the partnership was built on. The conservation status of the eagle species mirrors the conservation status of the large predators across the taxonomic groups. The species at the top of the food web are the species most sensitive to the changes in the ecosystems below them, and the most sensitive to the direct human impacts that target top predators. The bald eagle's recovery from fewer than 500 breeding pairs in the continental United States in the 1960s to more than 10,000 pairs today is one of the most celebrated conservation successes in North American wildlife management, produced by the combination of the DDT ban that eliminated the pesticide whose eggshell thinning was preventing successful reproduction, the legal protection under the Endangered Species Act, and the reduction in the direct persecution that had historically treated the bald eagle as a competitor for the fish resources that the fishing industry and the subsistence hunters also depended on. The Philippine eagle situation is less encouraging. Fewer than 800 individuals remain in the fragmented forests of the Philippine Islands, in a population that the deforestation of the Philippine archipelago has reduced from the numbers that occupied the forests before the 20th century's agricultural expansion began. The Philippine eagle requires a territory of approximately 100 square kilometers of intact lowland forest to sustain a breeding pair, and the fragmentation of the remaining forest into patches smaller than this minimum has rendered the majority of the remaining forest unsuitable for breeding. The conservation of the Philippine eagle is the conservation of the Philippine lowland forest. They cannot be separated because the eagle's existence is defined by the forest's existence in the depth and the connectivity that the eagle's territory requirements demand. The thermal that carries the eagle in the morning is the thermal that the warming earth below produces as the sun heats the dark rock faces and the bare soil at a faster rate than the vegetated areas, creating columns of rising warm air that the eagle enters from below and rides in the slow banking circle that extracts altitude from the rising column without the expenditure of energy that flapping flight requires. The eagle that enters a strong thermal in the morning can rise from the valley floor to the altitude of the mountain ridge above, without a single wing beat, simply by banking in the circle that keeps it within the rising air column and waiting for the altitude to accumulate. This is soaring, not the effortful dynamic soaring of the albatross that extracts energy from the wind gradient over the open ocean, but the static soaring of the thermal that the landscape produces and that the eagle exploits with the patience of an animal whose daily energy budget has been optimized across millions of years of evolution for exactly this strategy of minimum effort and maximum surveillance. The eagle rises on the morning thermal, and from the altitude it has gained without effort, it surveys the territory below for the movement that will become the day's first hunt. The morning is beginning below it. The valley is green in the early light. The river catches the sun in 1,000 points of reflection. The rabbit at the woodland edge freezes, its instinct registering the shape high above. The eagle sees everything. The question of what the eagle experiences when it soars, whether there is anything it is like to be a bird riding a thermal over a mountain range, looking down at a landscape that the human eye cannot resolve at the same detail from the same height, is a question that the philosophy of animal consciousness has not resolved, and that the neuroscience of bird cognition has only recently begun to approach with the methodological tools that the question requires. What the research has established is that the avian brain, despite its compact size and its superficially different structure from the mammalian brain, contains the neural circuits for the complex cognitive functions that the eagle's behavioral repertoire demands. The avian pallium, the region of the bird brain that performs the functions carried out by the mammalian cortex, has been found to contain neurons whose connectivity and whose activity patterns during complex behavioral tasks are comparable to those found in the mammalian cortex performing equivalent tasks. The bird brain that navigates across a continent remembers the resources of a 30-year home range, maintains a pair bond across decades of seasonal separation, and executes the high-speed three-dimensional targeting calculation of the stoop, is not doing these things with a simpler version of the neural machinery that the mammal uses. It is doing them with a different, but comparably sophisticated version of the same kind of neural computation. Whether this neural computation is accompanied by anything that resembles experience is a question whose answer the current science cannot provide. The eagle soaring over the mountain does not report what it is like. It simply soars, and the soaring continues whether or not anything is experiencing it from the inside. The young eagle that makes its first successful hunt, the prey taken cleanly, the stoop delivering the killing contact that the weeks of missed strikes and awkward landings have been building toward, is an eagle at the beginning of the long arc of skill development that the adult eagle's apparent mastery represents. The research on raptor hunting success rates has found that juveniles succeed in a small fraction of the attempts that adult birds succeed in, and that the improvement in success rate across the first few years of life is gradual and continuous, rather than stepwise. There is no single moment when the bird becomes a competent hunter, only the slow accumulation of the neural patterning and the muscular memory and the perceptual experience that eventually produces the adult's fluid, rapid, accurate execution. The patience required to develop this mastery, the years of missed strikes and failed stoops and prey that escaped at the last second, and the persistent return to the attempt that the next day brings, is not patience in any human sense of consciously choosing to continue despite frustration. It is the behavioral expression of the biological drive to hunt, maintained by the hunger that the failed attempts produce, in a nervous system that is learning through each attempt whether the parameters of the last one were better or worse than the attempt before. The eagle learns to hunt the way the human learns to walk, not by deciding to learn, but by the nervous system extracting the information that each trial produces and adjusting the next trial accordingly. The sky at the end of the day holds the eagle later than it holds most birds. The thermals collapse as the earth cools after sunset, but in the hour before they do, the hour when the rock faces and the bare ridges are releasing the day's accumulated heat in a final burst of rising air before the cooling air of the night replaces them, the eagle is still in the sky, riding the last thermals of the day in the golden light that makes the white tail of the golden eagle's adult plumage glow like a lamp. This last soaring of the day has a quality of abundance to it. The eagle is not hunting now. The prey have gone to ground for the evening, and the soaring is the soaring of an animal that is doing what it was made to do in the conditions that make it easiest, simply because the conditions exist and the body knows how to use them. The wings adjust in the way they have adjusted 10,000 times before. The circle tightens and widens as the thermal strengthens and weakens. The horizon turns from gold to rose to the first deep blue of the evening. The thermal dissolves. The air is still. The eagle closes its wings and drops in a long, shallow glide toward the perch that the evening is calling it back to. There is nothing left to do today. The hunting is done. The territorial advertisement is done. The monitoring of the valley below is done. The day is folding itself into the night and taking with it everything that the day required. Let that folding happen in you too. Let the day close the way the thermal closes, gradually, the energy dissipating into the cooling air, the activity slowing into the stillness that the night produces. The eagle is on its perch. The valley is quiet. The stars are appearing one by one in the darkening sky. You are in your stillness. The eagle is in its. The ridge holds both. The hearing of the eagle, which is often overshadowed in the popular account by the extraordinary visual system, is a sensory capability whose contribution to the hunting process is significant in the conditions where vision alone is insufficient. The barn owl has the most precisely mapped auditory system of any raptor. It can locate and strike prey in complete darkness by hearing alone, a capability whose neural basis in the auditory processing regions of the owl's brain has been studied in enough detail to make the barn owl one of the most important model systems in auditory neuroscience. The eagle's hearing is less extreme than the owl's, but substantially more acute than the human's in the frequency ranges relevant to the detection of small mammal movement in grass and undergrowth, the rustle of a rabbit through dry grass, the scratch of a squirrel on bark, the alarm call of a ground bird that has detected something moving nearby. These are sounds that the eagle processes at distances and at signal-to-noise ratios that the human ear cannot manage in equivalent conditions. The integration of the visual and the auditory streams in the eagle's hunting behavior has been studied through the analysis of hunt initiation events in which the eagle begins a hunting sequence in response to an auditory signal before any visual detection of the prey is apparent. The eagle that orients suddenly toward a sound source in the grass below it and initiates the controlled descent that precedes a strike is an eagle using its hearing to begin the targeting sequence that its vision will complete when the prey becomes visible at closer range. The sensory systems are not alternative channels for the same information. They are complementary systems whose integration produces a hunting capability that neither alone could match. The breath slows. This is the thing that happens now, without instruction, without effort, in the way that the body knows how to arrange itself when the day has released its hold, and the quiet of the evening has settled over everything that was moving an hour ago. The eagle is on the perch. The nictitating membrane has swept across the eye and back. The feathers are fluffed against the cold. The talons grip the branch in the automatic lock of the resting raptor, and the grip will hold through the night without the muscles being asked to maintain it, the tendons doing the work that the muscles would otherwise do, the body resting itself completely while the perch holds it in place. This is what the body is capable of when it is allowed to do what it knows. The grip does not need to be remembered. The warmth does not need to be managed. The breathing does not need to be directed. The systems that sustain life continue their work without the participation of the awareness that is right now releasing its hold on the day. Let the awareness go where it goes when it is not needed. The eagle is there in the dark. The mountain is there in the dark. The valley is there in the dark. And the river is there, catching the starlight in the way that water catches starlight. And the rabbit has gone to its burrow, and the squirrel is curled in its tree hollow, and every animal in the landscape that the eagle oversees from its perch has found the posture and the place that the night requires. You have found yours. The ridge is dark. The stars are out. Everything is as it should be. Sleep now. The Steller's sea eagle hunts the salmon rivers of the Russian Far East in the winter, when the salmon runs have ended and the rivers are beginning to freeze at the edges, and the eagles that gather at the remaining open water are among the most concentrated raptor populations on Earth in these months. The Steller's sea eagle is the heaviest eagle in the world, reaching 9 kilograms in large females, with a wingspan approaching 2.5 meters and a bright orange-yellow bill whose size and color make it the most visually distinctive eagle in the Old World. It hunts by wading into shallow water and seizing fish or by stealing carrion from other eagles on the ice, and its size makes it the dominant bird at any carcass it approaches. Nothing in the raptor world disputes access with an eagle that weighs 9 kilograms and has a bill the color of a sunset. The gathering of Steller's sea eagles at the winter fishing grounds of the Kamchatka Peninsula is one of the most dramatic wildlife spectacles in the temperate world, and one of the least visited. Hundreds of eagles, the Stellers alongside the white-tailed eagle whose range overlaps on the same rivers, congregate on the ice and in the riverside trees in numbers that the eagle's generally solitary nature does not prepare the observer for. The eagles tolerate each other's proximity in the context of the abundant resource the winter fish concentrations provide, and the social interactions at the winter gathering, the displacement behaviors, the kleptoparasitism, the vocalizations that carry across the frozen river, reveal a social flexibility in an animal that is usually encountered alone in a territory that its size makes unwilling to share. The white-tailed eagle's return to Britain, reintroduced after being extirpated by persecution in the early 20th century, is one of the most watched and most discussed wildlife reintroduction programs in European conservation history. The eagles that were brought from Norway in the 1970s and 1980s and released on the Scottish island of Rum established the breeding population that has since spread across Scotland and into England, producing a population that now exceeds 100 breeding pairs. The white-tailed eagle has a wingspan of up to 2.5 meters, the largest wingspan of any eagle in Europe, and its return to the skies over the Scottish Highlands after an absence of 70 years is a return that the people who watch the reintroduction proceed across the decades describe with the mixture of scientific satisfaction and something that resists precise categorization, the return of something that was missing from the sky. The sky with the eagle is different from the sky without it, not in any measurable aerodynamic or atmospheric sense, but in the sense that matters most to the people who live under it. The sky with the eagle in it is a sky that contains what it is supposed to contain, and the recognition of that completeness is a recognition whose value the economics of conservation cannot fully express, but that the people who have stood on a Scottish hillside and watched a white-tailed eagle circle overhead do not need an economist to explain. The eagle above the valley tonight is still there, on the perch where the evening carried it. The eye that was open an hour ago has closed. Both hemispheres have found the slow wave state, whose necessity the research on sleep deprivation in birds has established as clearly as the equivalent research in mammals. The eagle sleeps the way it does everything, completely, within the constraints that the environment imposes, finding the maximum available rest in the minimum available time. The valley below is quiet in a different way than the valley was quiet an hour ago. Then the quiet was the quiet of reduced activity. The animals that were moving in the evening have mostly stopped. The birds have found their roosts. The small mammals have retreated to their burrows. Now it is the quiet of the settled night, which is a different order of quiet. Not the absence of what was there before, but the presence of something that was waiting for the day to finish before it could fully arrive. You are in that quiet now. The breathing carries on without management. The body is arranged in the way that the night has arranged it, and the night is doing the work that the day required the awareness to do. The eagle is on its perch. You are in your rest. The mountain holds both, in the dark, in the cold, in the grace of the end of a day whose end has finally come. Let it be enough. It is. The bald eagle, whose recovery from the brink of extinction in the lower 48 states of America is one of the most frequently cited success stories in conservation history, is a bird whose symbolism and whose biology have existed in an uncomfortable tension since the species was chosen as the national emblem of the United States. Benjamin Franklin, who famously objected to the bald eagle's selection, preferred the wild turkey, an animal he considered more respectable because it was a genuinely Native American bird of good character, whereas the bald eagle he characterized as a bird of bad moral character because of its habit of stealing fish from the osprey. Franklin was observing something real about the bald eagle's ecology. Kleptoparasitism, the stealing of prey from other predators, is documented as a regular component of the bald eagle's foraging strategy, particularly in areas where the eagle is abundant and the osprey and other fishing birds are also present. Whether this constitutes bad moral character or adaptive flexibility is a matter of perspective. The bald eagle's recovery was not produced by the eagle's moral character. It was produced by the removal of DDT from the agricultural chemical palette. The compound, whose concentration in the food chain, through the bioaccumulation that fat-soluble organochlorine pesticides undergo as they move up the trophic levels, had reached concentrations in the eagle's body sufficient to interfere with the calcium metabolism of eggshell formation, producing shells so thin that the incubating adults crushed them under their own weight. The bald eagle went from nesting in the thousands across North America to nesting in the hundreds in the lower 48 in the decades following DDT's widespread adoption after the Second World War. The ban removed the chemical from the system, and the eagles that survived the DDT era began producing viable eggs again, and the population has grown continuously since. The eyrie, the nest, is the fixed point of the eagle pair's year in a way that no other location in their territory is. The territory itself may shift at its margins as the pair's competitive situation changes and as the prey distribution responds to the seasons. The hunting perches and the roost sites are used regularly, but not exclusively. But the eyrie is the center, the place to which both birds return at the start of each breeding season. The physical record of the years of their partnership in the sticks and the branches, and the lining material that each season adds to the structure that the first season began. The eagle that lands on the eyrie in the early spring, the first arrival after the winter separation of the migratory pair, or the first visit of the year to the nest site for the resident pair, lands on a structure whose layers contain the accumulated record of its productive life. The nest that has been used for 20 years contains 20 years of bringing material, 20 years of breeding seasons, 20 years of the choices about what to line the cup with and what branch to place at the outer rim. It is, in the most literal sense, the physical record of a life. The structure that a life has built, added to each year, returned to each year, the center around which everything else has organized itself. There is something quietly beautiful in the idea of a place to which you return, year after year, that holds the layers of all the returns before this one. A place that knows you in the way that only the accumulation of time produces. The eagle lands on its eyrie in the spring, and the eyrie holds it as it has always held it, with the solidity of something that was built one piece at a time across the years, and that is, because of those years, stronger than it was at the beginning. The night above the mountain is a different sky than the day sky. The thermals are gone. The air is still and cold, and the stars are close in the way that mountain stars are close. No moisture in the air to scatter the light, nothing between the eye and the source of the light except the distance itself. The Milky Way is a band across the sky that the light pollution of the cities below the mountain has not reached here, and in it, if the eye were as good as the eagle's, individual star systems would resolve from the blur of the band into the distinct points of their individual lights. The eagle's eye, which in daylight resolves detail at 8 times the human resolution, does not have the same advantage in starlight. The rod photoreceptors that dominate the retina's sensitivity in low light are different in arrangement from the cone-dense retina that the daylight vision relies on, and the eagle's night vision, while adequate for the navigation of the return to the perch in the late dusk, is not the extraordinary tool that the daylight vision is. The eagle that sits on its perch looking out over the darkened valley is an eagle looking at a dark world in which the familiar landscape is present but not visible in the detail that the day provides. This is what it is like to be in the dark, for the eagle, the familiar made unfamiliar by the absence of the light whose presence makes it legible. And the eagle sits with this unfamiliarity, not troubled by it, waiting with the patience of an animal that knows the light will return. It always has. It always does. You are in your dark now too. The familiar shapes of the day are present but not visible. The breath comes and goes in the dark. The body is in the position that the night requires. And the awareness, which has been awake and attending and managing since the light came this morning, is beginning to release its grip on the legibility of things. Let it go unlegible for a while. The eagle is waiting on its perch for the morning. You are waiting for nothing. You are just resting in the dark in the mountain air that has no memory of the day's heat in the stillness of the night that holds everything the day released. The stars are out. The eagle is on its perch. You are here. That is all that is needed tonight. Settle in. Let the body find the position it wants for the night. There is a place on the Serengeti Plain where the horizon is so flat and so far away that the sky takes up 3/4 of what the eye can see, and where, in the early morning before the heat begins, the grass is silver-grey with dew and everything is still. In that stillness, a herd of zebras materializes out of the half-light, the way that herds materialize when you are watching a landscape carefully, not arriving but simply becoming visible, as if they were always there, and the light is only now sufficient to reveal them. They are grazing, they are unhurried. The black and white of their coats catches the early light in alternating bands, and the whole herd pulses gently with their breathing and their slow movement through the grass. Let that image come in, and let the body settle a little further with it. Subscribe right now and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Hit that button, it costs you nothing, and it keeps this channel going. Drop a comment telling us where in the world you are watching from and what time it is. We read every single one. The zebra is a horse that chose a different continent. Not literally, the evolutionary separation of the zebra from the horses and the asses of the genus Equus occurred approximately 4 million years ago, when the common ancestor of the modern zebras diverged from the lineage that would produce the wild horse of the Eurasian steppes. But the basic biology is the same. The same single-toed hoof, whose fusion of the original 5 digits into one is the anatomical foundation of the running speed that makes the equids the fastest sustained runners of any large mammal over distances beyond a kilometer. The same digestive system that processes grass through fermentation in the hindgut, allowing the equids to subsist on the lowest quality plant material of any large African herbivore. The same social structures organized around the stallion-led family group. The same capacity for the sustained gallop that has made the domesticated horse the most important non-human animal in human history. What the zebra chose, or rather, what the African continent chose for the zebra across 4 million years of evolution, is the stripe. No one fully understands the stripe. This is one of the most interesting facts in biology, that one of the most visually striking patterns in the natural world, on one of the most studied groups of animals in Africa, after more than a century of scientific attention, is still not definitively explained. Multiple hypotheses have been proposed, tested, and found to be either partially supported or insufficient to explain the full phenomenon. The stripe remains at the level of the evolutionary function for which it originally developed, a genuine open question. The camouflage hypothesis is the oldest and the most intuitively appealing. The black and white pattern breaks up the outline of the zebra's body, making it harder for predators to identify individual animals in a herd. The research that has tested this hypothesis has found mixed results. The stripe pattern does reduce the visual distinctiveness of the individual zebra in low contrast light, particularly at dawn and dusk, when the binary contrast of the pattern blends differently with the ambient light than it does in full daylight. But against open savanna grass in full daylight, the black and white zebra is not camouflaged in any sense that competes with the cryptic coloration of the impala or the wildebeest. The thermoregulation hypothesis proposes that the alternating black and white bands create convection currents above the surface of the skin. The black bands absorb more solar radiation and heat more quickly than the white bands, creating a microscale air movement above the skin surface that enhances evaporative cooling. Research using thermal cameras on living zebras has found measurable temperature differences between the black and white bands that are consistent with this mechanism, and the research on sweat gland distribution has found higher densities of sweat glands under the black bands than under the white bands, suggesting a functional coupling between the heat absorption and the sweating that the thermoregulation hypothesis would predict. The evidence for thermoregulation is the most consistent across the available research. The fly deterrence hypothesis proposes that the stripe pattern deters biting flies, horseflies and tsetse flies, through a visual disruption of the landing response that the flies use to orient to large, uniformly colored surfaces. The research on this hypothesis has produced some of the most striking results in the zebra stripe literature. In controlled experiments, horses wearing striped coats experience substantially fewer successful fly landings than the same horses wearing uniform coats or no coats at all. The mechanism appears to be that the stripe pattern disrupts the optomotor response that biting flies use to land on large objects, producing a visual signal that is interpreted differently from the uniform color signal that horses and other large mammals present. In an environment where tsetse flies transmit sleeping sickness and where horsefly bites produce blood loss and secondary infections that are significant health burdens on the animals they target, a coat pattern that reduces fly landing rates would represent a significant fitness advantage. The individual recognition hypothesis proposes that the stripe pattern serves as a visual identity marker, that the pattern of each individual zebra is sufficiently distinctive that group members can identify each other by their stripe patterns in the same way that humans recognize each other by facial features. The research on zebra stripe pattern variation has confirmed that individual stripe patterns are indeed distinctive and consistent across the individual's lifetime. And the research on zebra social behavior has found evidence that zebras attend to and respond differently to familiar versus unfamiliar individuals in ways consistent with individual recognition. Whether the stripe pattern is the primary cue for this recognition, or whether smell and vocalization play a more important role, remains an open question. The truth is probably that all of these hypotheses are partially correct, and that the stripe pattern has been maintained across 4 million years of zebra evolution because it provides multiple overlapping benefits whose individual contributions to fitness are each insufficient alone, but whose combined effect is sufficient to outweigh the costs, primarily the reduction in background matching that a cryptic coloration strategy would provide. The stripe is doing several things at once, as the most evolutionarily successful biological structures typically are, and the difficulty of isolating any single function in the field data reflects this multifunctionality rather than the absence of any function at all. The herd dynamics of the zebra reflect a social complexity that the animal's striking appearance does not immediately suggest. The basic social unit of the plains zebra, the most abundant and the most studied of the 3 zebra species, is the family group. A single adult stallion, 1 to 6 adult mares, and their immature offspring. The family group is a stable social unit whose members remain together across years and sometimes across the entire adult lives of the females. The stallion defends access to the mares in the family group against rival stallions, and in return, the mares and their foals benefit from the stallion's vigilance against predators, his defense of the group against harassment, and the social stability that the consistent membership of the family group provides. The foals grow up within the social context of the family group, learning the hierarchy and the relationships and the behavioral norms of the group through years of daily interaction with its members. Above the family group, the zebra's social organization extends into the herd, the larger aggregation of multiple family groups and bachelor stallion groups that forms around shared resource access, primarily water and seasonal grazing. The herd has no permanent membership and no overall leader. It is a temporary aggregation whose composition changes as family groups join and leave based on their ranging behavior and resource needs. Within the herd, the family groups maintain their internal cohesion. The mares and foals of a family group stay close to their stallion, even within the larger aggregation, while benefiting from the collective vigilance and the predator detection capability that larger numbers provide. The stallion's role in the family group is not merely reproductive. The research on zebra social dynamics has found that stallions invest substantially in the protection of their family group members against predators, interposing themselves between the group and an approaching predator, herding the mares and foals toward the safer ground, and staying between the threat and the escaping group in the flight response that the predator's approach produces. The stallion that is killed or incapacitated during a predator encounter has accepted a risk that the other members of the group did not face. This is a genuine cost, and the research on the mortality rates of adult male zebras relative to adult female zebras has found that the differential predation risk that the stallion's protective role produces is reflected in the survival statistics. The foal that is born into the family group arrives after a gestation of approximately 12 months, close to the same gestation length as the domestic horse, and must stand and nurse within the first hour of its life. The first hours and days are the most vulnerable. The foal's legs are proportionally very long relative to its body at birth, and the coordination of the rapid gallop that escaping a predator requires takes days to develop to the level that the savanna demands. The mother spends the first days after birth keeping the foal close and preventing other herd members from approaching too closely, a behavior the research has interpreted as a period of maternal imprinting during which the foal learns to recognize its mother's stripe pattern, her call and her smell with sufficient certainty to locate and follow her in the chaos of a herd in flight. The recognition of the mother by the foal and the mother's recognition of the foal depends on the stripe pattern as one of several cues. Zebra mares have been observed responding to recordings of their own foal's call, but not to recordings of other foal's calls, demonstrating auditory recognition. The stripe pattern provides a visual cue that the foal can use at greater distance than the olfactory cue that requires close approach. And in the conditions of a herd in flight, the visual distinctiveness of the mother's pattern is the cue that allows the foal to locate her in the moving mass of similar-looking animals. The foal nurses for approximately 8 to 13 months, during which it is the focus of the mare's primary protective investment. As the nursing period extends, the foal begins to supplement its diet with the grass that will constitute its entire diet as an adult, and the transition from nursing to grazing is a gradual process that mirrors the transition of the equid digestive system from the simple gut of the milk-drinking neonate to the complex hindgut fermentation system of the adult herbivore. The grass that the adult zebra eats is not the grass that the wildebeest and the Thompson's gazelle prefer. The zebra's digestive system processes grass through hindgut fermentation, the fermentation of plant cellulose in the cecum and the large intestine by symbiotic bacteria, which occurs after the initial digestion of the more easily digestible plant fractions in the stomach and small intestine. This system is less efficient at extracting nutrition from high-quality grass than the ruminant stomach system used by the wildebeest, the gazelle, and the buffalo, but it is faster. The zebra processes a given quantity of grass in less time than a ruminant of equivalent body size, and because the hindgut fermentation system tolerates lower quality plant material than the ruminant system, the zebra can subsist on the coarser, more fibrous, lower nutrition grass that the other herbivores do not select. This digestive difference has important consequences for the ecological relationship between the zebra and the other large herbivores with which it shares the Serengeti ecosystem. The migration ecology of the Serengeti's large herbivores is organized around the sequential grazing of the ecosystem's grass resource in a succession that begins with the zebra. The zebra moves onto the long grass areas of the Serengeti's wet season feeding grounds first, eating the tall, coarse, low-nutrition outer layers of the grass that the other herbivores cannot efficiently process. This removes the tall, mature grass and exposes the shorter, more nutritious grass beneath, which the wildebeest then graze. Behind the wildebeest, the Thompson's gazelle finds the shortest and richest grass that has been exposed by the grazing of the two larger species. The three species are not competing. They are processing the same resource in a sequence that each species is specialized for a different phase of. The zebra, by this analysis, creates the conditions for the wildebeest's grazing, which creates the conditions for the gazelle's grazing. The Serengeti migration is not a story of competition. It is a story of complementarity, in which each species' digestive specialization enables the specializations of the species that follow it. Let that image of the migrating herd settle into the quiet of the evening. The grass is very long in the wet season plains, and the zebras are moving through it in the way that large animals move through tall grass, pushing it aside with the body, the stripes disappearing and reappearing with each step. The herd's movement, leaving a visible trail of flattened grass that shows where 10,000 animals have been. 10,000 zebras. The sound of that many animals moving through grass is not the dramatic sound that the word migration suggests. It is more like a very large, very distributed breath, the rustle of 10,000 individual contact points with the grass, the low calling between family group members who are keeping track of each other in the crowd, the soft percussion of hooves on dry ground. The sound carries across a kilometer of open plain without effort, and it arrives at the ear of the listener not as a single event, but as a continuous presence, a sound that the landscape is producing from all directions at once. The predators know this sound. The lion in the long grass knows it from 4 kilometers away. The cheetah on the termite mound knows it. The hyena in its den knows it. The arrival of the zebra migration is known to every predator in the Serengeti long before it is visible. And the predictability of the migration, its approximate timing, its direction, its routes along the river corridors, is information that the predators have encoded in their territorial choices and their hunting strategies across generations. The zebra knows the predators are there. The vigilance of the herd, the percentage of animals with their heads raised at any given moment, the ear rotations that monitor sounds from all directions, the alarm snort that propagates through the herd when any individual detects a threat, is calibrated to the predator pressure that the migration route imposes. The Mara River crossing, where the wildebeest and the zebras must cross water that holds crocodiles during the southward migration, is a crossing that the herd approaches with a collective hesitation that the research has documented as a genuine information-gathering process. The animals at the riverbank assess the crossing point, the crocodile presence, the current strength, and the behavior of the animals around them, and the crossing begins when the accumulated signals reach a threshold the research has not fully characterized, a group-level decision rather than any individuals. The river crossing is over. The herd is on the other side. The grass of the next season's range is ahead. Let that image of the crossing be the last active image before the passive ones begin to take over. The water is behind. The grass is ahead. The body knows how to move through the night, the way the zebra knows how to move through the migration. Not by planning, not by direction, but by the accumulated tendency of a body that has done this before and knows the way. The breathing is very slow now. The grass of the Serengeti is dark in the night, and the herd is scattered through it, the family groups maintaining their proximity by the soft calls and the familiar smell of each other, the stallion at the periphery of each group, monitoring the darkness for the movement that does not belong to the herd. The zebra sleeps standing like the horse. It sleeps in the same unihemispheric way that the eagle sleeps, one side resting, one side watching, the eye on the watching side open to the darkness of the savanna. Full REM sleep, which requires the full muscle relaxation that only lying down allows, occurs in the zebra for only a few hours per day, and only when the conditions, the predator pressure, the time of day, the availability of a safe resting site, allow the full vulnerability of the recumbent position. The safe resting site tonight is here in the center of the herd, where the collective vigilance of thousands of family groups makes the probability of a predator reaching any individual before the alarm propagates through the herd very low. The zebra foal that has been close to its mother since dawn lies down in the grass beside her, and the mother stands above it in the standing sleep that the night requires, and the family group is arranged around them in the loose proximity that safety permits, and the herd is arranged around the family groups in the loose proximity that the grass and the water and the darkness permit. And somewhere at the edge of the plain, the lion is still awake. The amber eyes are open. The nose is working the night air. The ears are rotating toward the sound of the herd in the darkness. But the herd is large and the night is dark, and the zebra foal is asleep in the grass beside its mother, and the mother's eyes are closed on one side and open on the other, and the darkness holds everything, the herd and the lion and the grass and the distant sound of the river still carrying the water from the mountains where the rain fell last month, in the same patient. Unhurried dark, you are in your dark. The breathing is very slow, the day is very far behind you now, let it stay there. The herd is in the grass, moving in the dark in the way that 10,000 animals move when they are not running. The small adjustments, the brief graze between the resting periods, the soft calling between family group members that keeps the cohesion without requiring anyone to go anywhere. You do not need to go anywhere tonight. The grass is here, the dark is here. The breathing that has been carrying you since you began listening is still carrying you now, slower than it was, into the quiet of this hour when everything that needed to happen today has happened. And nothing is required of you except to let the body do what the body knows how to do in the dark. The zebra foal is asleep. The mother stands above it. The Serengeti holds them both. The night holds you. Let go of the day's grip. It is already releasing. Sleep. The grevy's zebra and the mountain zebra represent the other two species in the genus, each adapted to environments that the plains zebra does not inhabit, and each carrying a stripe pattern whose differences from the plains zebra's pattern reflect the different ecological pressures that different environments have placed on the thermoregulation, the social signaling, and the predator avoidance, whose demands the stripe simultaneously addresses. The grevy's zebra is the largest of the three species and the most endangered, with a population estimated at fewer than 3,000 individuals in the semi-arid savannas and grasslands of northern Kenya and Ethiopia. Its stripe pattern is the finest of the three species, narrow stripes that cover the body down to the hooves, with a distinctive white belly that the plains zebra lacks. The grevy's zebra's social organization differs substantially from the plains zebra's family group structure. Males hold large territories that they defend against other males, and females move freely through these territories, associating with different males at different times, rather than maintaining the long-term attachment to a single stallion that the plains zebra's family group produces. The mountain zebra inhabits the dry, rocky slopes of southern Africa, the Cape Mountains and the Namibian highlands, in a population that the overhunting of the 19th and early 20th centuries reduced to near extinction, and that the formal protection of the remaining animals has brought back from fewer than 100 individuals to a current population of several thousand. The mountain zebra's most distinctive feature is a dewlap, a fold of skin on the throat whose function the research has not definitively established, and the grid pattern of the rump stripes that gives the mountain zebra a slightly different rear-end appearance from the plains zebra. The auditory world of the zebra is a world organized around the social calls that maintain the family group's cohesion and the alarm calls that coordinate the group's response to predator threats. The contact call, a soft two-note vocalization that the research has described as resembling a dog's bark in its acoustic properties, is the call that family group members use to locate each other within the herd, to signal their position when visibility is reduced by tall grass or by the density of the herd around them, and to maintain the continuous low-level communication that sustains the family group's identity within the larger aggregation. The alarm snort, an explosive exhalation through the nostrils, is the signal that any individual zebra produces when it detects a potential threat, and the research on alarm snort transmission through the herd has found that the alarm propagates through the herd fast enough that all members are moving within seconds of the first individual's detection. The alarm call is followed by the characteristic stiff-legged display. The individual that detected the threat stands facing the threat direction, with its head raised and its ears oriented toward the threat, while the other herd members orient toward the displaying individual and use its body orientation to locate the threat direction. The display is an honest signal. It requires the displaying individual to face the threat rather than immediately fleeing, which temporarily increases its own vulnerability, and its honesty is the mechanism that makes it reliable as a social signal. An individual that gave the alarm display without a real threat would be identified as unreliable by the social learning that the other herd members are performing, and the research on alarm call systems has found that individuals calibrate their response based on the historical reliability of the caller. The predator evasion behavior of the zebra has been studied in enough detail to reveal the tactical dimensions of a behavior that appears, from a distance, to be simply running away. The initial flight response to a predator's approach is not a random scatter. The family group maintains its cohesion in flight, with the stallion typically at the rear of the fleeing group, between the predator and the mares and foals, whose escape his position is covering, and the foals running inside the group, protected by the bodies of the adults around them. The direction of flight is not random. The group moves toward the water or the open ground where the predator's cover advantage is minimized, and away from the terrain, features, the dense vegetation, the watercourse banks, the rough ground, where the predator's agility advantage is greatest. The speed available to the zebra in a sustained gallop reaches approximately 65 kilometers per hour, sufficient to outrun a lion over distances beyond approximately 400 meters, because the lion's higher top speed is a sprint speed that cannot be sustained beyond a few seconds, before the lion's oxygen debt accumulates to the level that forces abandonment of the chase. The zebra's advantage is in the sustained pace. It can maintain high speeds for longer than any of its major predators, and the escape strategy of the straight-line run that maintains pace rather than the zigzag that burns additional energy is the strategy that the research on prey escape behavior has found to be most effective when the distance to the predator is sufficient to make outrunning rather than outmaneuvering the more efficient option. The water that the zebra drinks every 1 to 2 days in the dry season is water whose location and whose reliability the zebra's ranging behavior is organized. Around in the months when the rains have stopped and the landscape's surface water has concentrated in the permanent pools and the river courses that the dry season has left. The zebra's requirement for daily water access during the dry season is a constraint that shapes its distribution across the landscape in ways that the wildebeest's physiology, slightly more tolerant of dehydration, does not produce in the same degree. And the competition for access to the permanent water sources in the dry season is one of the primary contexts in which the stallion's defensive behavior is directed not toward predators, but toward the other zebra groups that are competing for the same limited resource. The waterhole in the dry season is a gathering point for the zebras of a wide area, and the social interactions that occur at the waterhole, the approach and withdrawal sequences between rival stallions, the herding of family group members away from other groups by the stallion, the drinking sequences that balance individual need against the vulnerability of the drinking posture in the presence of crocodiles and lions, are among the most complex and the most intensely studied behaviors in the zebra's social repertoire. The zebra that is drinking is a zebra that has made an assessment of the risk and found it acceptable. It does not drink without making that assessment. The assessment takes the form of the minutes of standing at the waterhole edge with the head up and the ears alert before the head finally lowers to the water surface, and the drink itself is punctuated by the pauses for reassessment that the waterhole's predator history makes prudent. The Serengeti's wildebeest migration is the most famous large animal movement on Earth, and the zebra's migration is its less celebrated companion. The approximately 500,000 zebras that participate in the Serengeti Mara migration move in the same general circuit as the 1.5 million wildebeest, but not always in the same timing or the same precise location. The zebras tend to move ahead of the wildebeest on the circuit, arriving at the wet season feeding grounds slightly before the wildebeest do, and departing from the dry season refuges slightly earlier, in a pattern that reflects the complementary digestive strategies and the different timing of the grass quality response to the rainfall that each species is tracking. The research on the movement ecology of the migratory zebras has used GPS collar technology to track individual family groups across the full annual circuit of the migration, and the individual level tracking data has revealed a level of route fidelity, the consistency with which individuals follow the same routes in successive years, that was not anticipated from the observation of the herd-level movement patterns. Individual family groups return to the same areas in the same sequence year after year, suggesting that the route knowledge is retained across years and passed down within the family group, from experienced adults to the younger animals that are learning the circuit for the first time. The migration is not instinctive in the sense of being pre-programmed. It is learned, maintained by the social transmission of route knowledge within the family group, and updated by the real-time tracking of the rainfall and the grass quality signals that indicate whether the expected resources are actually available at the expected locations. The ecology of the stripe extends into the genetic and developmental biology of the zebra in ways that the field research has recently begun to characterize with the molecular tools of modern genetics. The genes that control the stripe pattern have been identified through the comparative genomics of the 3 zebra species and their closest relatives, the African wild ass and the domestic horse, and the research has found that the stripe pattern is produced by the differential regulation of pigment cell migration and differentiation during embryonic development, with the stripe boundaries forming along the boundaries of differing gene expression domains in the developing skin. The molecular mechanism of stripe formation in the zebra is now one of the most clearly characterized examples of the reaction diffusion patterning systems that the developmental biology has found to produce the regular, repeated patterns in biological organisms across a wide range of species and tissue types, the same class of mechanism that produces the spots of the leopard, the bands of the tiger, the whorls of a snail's shell, and the patterns of fish scales. The variation in stripe pattern between the three zebra species, finer and more numerous in the gravies, broader and less numerous in the mountain zebra, intermediate in the plains zebra, reflects the tuning of the underlying developmental mechanism by different selection pressures across the different environments and different ecological contexts of the three species. The stripe pattern is not a fixed biological output. It is the outcome of a developmental system whose parameters are adjustable across evolutionary time by the selection that the stripe's function in each environment and social context imposes. The morning comes to the Serengeti slowly in the season when the days are long. The sky lightens from black to grey to the first pale blue of dawn over a period of 30 minutes or more, and in that gradual lightening, the herd begins to stir. The animals that were lying down rise in the sequence that the family hierarchy determines. The mares first, the stallion last, the foals uncertainly in between. The animals that were standing in the lighter sleep of the standing does begin to move their feet, to stretch the neck, to swing the head from side to side in the movement of the alert animal, re-engaging with its environment after the hours of reduced engagement that the night permitted. The first light picks out the stripe pattern in the grey-white of the early dawn, and the herd materializes again from the grass the way it materialized in the image that began this documentary, not arriving but becoming visible, as if it has always been there, and the light is only now sufficient to reveal it. The stripes catch the horizontal light of the rising sun and glow for a moment in the gold of the early morning before the sun climbs high enough to flatten the shadows and the glow fades into the familiar black and white of the midday. The zebra that is watching you from across the Serengeti grass is watching with the eyes of an animal that has been watching the savannah for 4 million years. It is not alarmed. You are too far away and too still to trigger the alarm response that a closer moving observer would produce. It watches for a moment longer, the ears rotating to confirm what the eyes have registered, and then the head drops back to the grass and the grazing continues, unhurried. In the long morning that the savannah has always offered to the animals that have learned to live in it, the predator-prey relationship between the lion and the zebra is one of the most studied large predator interactions in the world, and its dynamics reveal the full complexity of what an evolutionary arms race between predator and prey produces over millions of years of mutual selection pressure. The lion's hunting strategy against zebras differs from its strategy against wildebeest in ways that reflect the zebra's defensive capabilities. The zebra's kick, delivered with the hind legs in the same powerful defensive strike that the horse uses against predators, is capable of breaking a lion's jaw or skull with a direct hit, and the lion's approach to the zebra hunt accounts for this by preferring the ambush approach that minimizes the opportunity for the zebra to deliver a kick before the lion has secured a grip. The throat grip that ends the hunt is typically applied from a position that puts the lion behind and above the zebra's head, where the hind leg's kick range does not reach effectively. The zebra's stripe pattern complicates the lion's targeting in ways that the predator strategy research has explored. When a herd of zebras is moving, the merging of the stripe patterns of multiple individuals creates a visual complexity that makes tracking any single individual's movement trajectory more difficult for the predator than tracking the equivalent movement of a uniformly colored animal would be. The dazzle effect, named after the disruptive camouflage patterns applied to warships in the First World War, creates a visual signal whose high contrast, high frequency spatial structure is difficult for the mammalian motion detection system to parse when multiple moving individuals are producing overlapping patterns simultaneously. Whether this effect is sufficient to provide meaningful protection against the lion's targeting system, which has co-evolved with the zebra's stripe pattern, remains debated in the research. The social bonds within the zebra family group have been characterized by the long-term research programs as bonds of genuine behavioral complexity, not the simple spatial association of animals sharing a resource, but a social relationship whose dimension the behavioral research has explored through the observation of the affiliative, protective, and competitive behaviors that define the quality of social bonds in social mammals. The mutual grooming that family group members engage in, standing side by side, each grooming the other's neck and withers with the teeth and the lips, is the behavioral expression of the social bond in the equid family that the research has found to be correlated with the frequency of other forms of social affiliation and with the tolerance that bonded individuals show for each other's proximity in competition contexts. The mares of a family group that groom each other frequently are mares that also support each other in competitive interactions with other family groups and that coordinate their behavior in the vigilance rotations that maintain the collective alertness of the group. The stallion's bond with the mares of his family group has been characterized in the research as something more than the simple competitive exclusion of other males from reproductive access. Stallions show preferential affiliation with favored mares, spending more time in proximity, grooming more frequently, showing more intense protective behavior, in patterns that persist across years and do not simply reflect the mare's reproductive status. The pair bond between a stallion and a favored mare within the family group is a stable long-term relationship whose behavioral signature parallels the pair bonds documented in other long-lived socially complex mammals. The mineral lick is a resource that brings zebras together from wide areas in the dry season, a site where the soil's mineral content, particularly sodium and calcium, provides the supplement to the mineral-poor dry season grass diet that the zebra's physiology requires. The research on mineral lick use by zebras has found that the same lick sites are used repeatedly across years by the same family groups, suggesting that the location of the lick is knowledge that is transmitted within the family group from experienced adults to younger animals, in the same way that the migration route knowledge is transmitted. The mineral lick site is one of the places where the social geography of the zebra's world becomes visible, where the ranges of multiple family groups overlap, and where the intergroup interactions that the lick's shared use produces illuminate the tolerance and the conflict that characterize the zebra's relationship with conspecifics outside the family group. The interactions at the lick are not predominantly aggressive. The shared resource is used by multiple groups in a sequence of access that the larger and more dominant groups determine, with smaller groups waiting at the periphery for the opportunity to approach when the dominant groups have had their fill. The night is very deep now. The Serengeti is very quiet. The herd is settled in the grass in the way that only the middle of the night produces. The activity of the early night, the grazing and the brief alarms and the social adjustments that the herd makes as the darkness deepens, has given way to the quieter state of the hours when the darkness is fullest and the air is coldest, and everything that was moving has found a reason to be still. The foal is asleep beside its mother. The mother is in the light sleep of the standing does, one hemisphere resting, one watching. The stallion is at the edge of the group, his outline barely visible against the grass. The family is arranged as it always arranges itself for the night, the young at the center, the adults at the periphery, the protective geometry that the predator pressure has shaped over millions of years of the zebra's existence on this plain. The lion is somewhere in the darkness. The darkness does not reveal which direction, but the herd is large and the night is deep, and the collective vigilance of thousands of animals is a net fine enough to catch almost anything that moves through it before it reaches any individual. Almost anything. The world is made of risks that the biology manages but does not eliminate, and the zebra's long evolutionary history on this plane is the history of managing the risks that cannot be eliminated, by running fast enough, by being numerous enough, by sleeping in the way that keeps one eye open, by knowing the landscape well enough to read the direction that safety lies in when the alarm snort comes in the dark. You have managed your risks today. The biology has done its work. The night holds the rest. The last thing the body needs at the end of a day is to be asked to do something. The breathing that has been slowing since the narrative began does not need to be instructed to slow further. The body that has been settling into the surface beneath it does not need to be told to release more tension. The mind that has followed the zebra across the Serengeti plain through the stripe mystery and the family group cohesion and the river crossing and the predator in the grass, has been doing exactly what the sleep research has found that the resting mind needs, moving through images and ideas that are interesting enough to hold the attention away from the anxieties of the day, but gentle enough not to generate the arousal that keeps the sleep away. The Serengeti in the night is holding its own population of sleeping and watching animals, and the zebra's contribution to that population is the family groups distributed through the grass, each organized around the sleeping foal at the center, each awake on one side and asleep on the other, each managing the vulnerability of rest in the way that millions of years of equid evolution on this plane has taught the species to manage it. You are managing the vulnerability of rest in the way that your biology manages it. By not managing it at all, by allowing the systems that know how to rest without the supervision of the awareness that has been running all day and that now, finally, is being allowed to step back and let the body do what it knows. The grass is very long in the wet season. The zebra foal is asleep in it. The mother stands above. The Serengeti holds them in the dark. Let it hold you too. The conservation of the plains zebra, which is classified as near threatened rather than endangered, is conservation of a different kind from the emergency measures that the giraffe and the Grevy's zebra require. The plains zebra population of approximately 500,000 animals is the most abundant large mammal population in the Serengeti ecosystem, and its role in the ecosystem, as the first mover of the migration, the grass processor that enables the wildebeest's grazing, the prey base for the lion and the hyena and the wild dog, is a role whose importance to the ecosystem's functioning the research has characterized, but that the plains zebra's numerical abundance makes easy to underestimate. The abundance is not permanent. The habitat loss that has affected the giraffe across its range has affected the zebra in the same regions, and the prey removal from poaching and from the bushmeat trade has reduced the zebra population outside protected areas across much of its range. The plains zebra that migrates between the Serengeti and the Mara crosses the same national boundary whose management determines whether the corridor that the migration requires continues to exist. The resilience of the large population conceals the fragility of the ecological system that sustains it, and the conservation of the plains zebra is ultimately the conservation of the connected landscape whose extent and whose integrity the migration depends on. The stripe on the zebra's flank is silver in the moonlight, and the moonlight over the Serengeti is the light that has been coming down on this plain since before the first human stood upright on the African grassland and looked up at the source of it. The zebra does not know the moon's name, or its distance, or its effect on the tides of the distant oceans. The zebra knows the light it produces, which is enough light to see by when the eyes are adapted to it, and the warmth it does not produce, which makes the nights cold in the way that the cloudless sky of the dry season makes them cold. The moonlight is on the grass. The stripe is silver in it. The herd breathes. Somewhere in the darkness, the lion has made its assessment for the night and found the conditions unfavorable. The herd is large. The moonlight is full. The distance to any individual from the nearest cover is too great to cross without detection. The lion lies down in the grass. The herd breathes. The moon moves across the sky in the slow arc that it always moves across, and the shadows of the acacia trees turn slowly with it, and the silver stripes on the sleeping herd shift with the turning shadows. Everything on the Serengeti plain is in the motion that has no urgency and makes no sound, and carries everything forward into the morning that is, somewhere beyond the dark horizon, already being prepared. You do not need to prepare for it. It is being prepared without you. Let the night do its work. Let the stripe in the moonlight be the last image you hold, and then let that go too. The herd is breathing. You are breathing. The Serengeti holds you both. Sleep. The relationship between the zebra and the oxpecker is as old as the relationship between the giraffe and the oxpecker, and it operates through the same mechanism. The bird removes the ticks and the blood-sucking flies that the mammal's own grooming cannot reach, and the mammal provides the food resource and the mobile perch that the bird exploits. The zebra's striped coat provides a visual environment for the oxpecker that the bird navigates with the same efficiency. It navigates the giraffe's spotted coat or the buffalo's uniform brown. The tick is detectable against any background, and the oxpecker's visual system is calibrated for exactly that detection task. The oxpecker is not universally beneficial to its host. The research on oxpecker behavior has found that the birds feed not only on parasites and dead skin, but also on the blood of the wounds they open by probing beneath the ticks they remove, and in some cases on the living tissue of wounds that the host animals carry from previous injuries. The relationship is a mutualism with a parasite component. The host tolerates the bird because the net benefit of the parasite removal exceeds the net cost of the wound probing. But the net balance is not always unambiguously positive for the host. The zebra that allows the oxpecker to sit on its back is an animal managing a relationship whose costs and benefits it cannot calculate, but whose evolutionary history has calibrated to the point where tolerance is generally adaptive. The wet season on the Serengeti comes with the rains, and the rains come with the smell of rain on dry earth. The petrichor, whose chemistry involves the organic compound geosmin produced by soil bacteria and the aerosols generated when the first large raindrops hit the dry soil surface, a smell whose recognition by the animals of the savanna is as immediate and as behaviorally significant as the smell of a predator. The zebra's nose that detects the petrichor is a nose that has been evolved for exactly this detection, in an animal whose entire annual movement pattern is organized around the tracking of rainfall and its consequences for the grass quality and the grass distribution that the zebra's caloric needs require. The plain zebra's ability to track rainfall at distances, to detect the smell of rain falling tens of kilometers away, and to orient toward it in the way that the migration documentation has found them doing, is one of the most studied aspects of the zebra's ecological intelligence. The research on the triggers for migration initiation has found that the movement of family groups toward the wet season range begins before the rain arrives at the dry season refuge, in a timing that reflects the animal's detection of environmental signals, whose nature, the research has proposed, includes not only the distant smell of rain, but also the low-frequency infrasound that heavy rainfall produces, and that carries hundreds of kilometers through the atmosphere in the same frequency range that elephants use for long-distance communication. The zebra is moving toward the rain before the rain reaches it, following a signal that the human sensory system cannot detect at the distances the zebra responds to, in a behavioral system that is tracking the future of the ecosystem's resources in the same way that the eagle tracks the future of its prey's trajectory, not by planning, but by the accumulated evolutionary wisdom that the species carries in its nervous system and that expresses itself as behavior. The foal that was born this morning has been walking for 3 hours. It has nursed 3 times. It has been groomed by its mother, sniffed by 2 members of the family group, and has learned through the repeated presentations of its mother's flank the stripe pattern that will identify her in the chaos of the herd for the rest of its life. Tomorrow it will run its first short distance. Next week it will keep pace with the family group at the walking pace of the daily movement. In 6 months it will be weaned and beginning the integration into the herd's daily activity at the rate that its growing body allows. In 4 years it will be an adult, a mare who has been allocated to a family group through the same competitive and social processes that allocated her mother to hers, or a young stallion in the bachelor group that the family stallion has expelled him to at approximately the same age. The foal does not know any of this. It knows the smell of its mother, the warmth of its mother's side, and the grass that it has not yet learned to eat. That is everything it needs to know tonight. There is something in that simplicity that the mind can rest in at the end of a day whose complexity has been demanding all day. The foal knows what it needs, the needs are met. The night holds what needs to be held. You know what you need tonight, it is already being provided. The breathing is doing it. The dark is doing it. The night is doing it. Let it. The Mara River in the dry season is green-brown and fast-moving between the steep banks that the centuries of waterway erosion have cut through the red soil of the Kenyan highlands, and the crocodiles that wait in the deeper pools below the crossing points wait with the same stillness that they have always waited with, the stillness of a biology designed for exactly this kind of patient ambush in exactly this kind of waterway for hundreds of millions of years. The zebras at the crossing point know the crocodiles are there. The research on zebra behavior at river crossings has found that the approach to the crossing involves systematic information gathering. The animals at the front of the group scan the water surface and the banks, orient toward the places where the crocodile presence is most likely to be detected, and respond to the slight water surface disturbances that a submerged crocodile produces with a heightened alertness that is measurably different from their response to the undisturbed water. The zebra is not a naive prey animal that stumbles into the crocodile's ambush. It is an animal that knows what the river holds and that crosses it anyway, because the grass on the other side is what the season requires, and the risk of the crossing is the risk that the migration always involves. This willingness to cross the water that holds the threat is not courage in any anthropomorphic sense. It is the behavioral expression of an evolutionary bargain. The genes of the zebra that crossed the river and survived to reproduce on the other side are more numerous in the population than the genes of the zebra that stayed on the safe bank and missed the wet season grass. The crossing behavior is adaptive over evolutionary time, even though it costs individuals their lives in the crossings that the crocodile wins. The population pays the cost so that the species can continue. The morning comes. The crossing will happen. The grass is on the other side. The plain is very still in the last hour before the dawn. The stars are still out. The air temperature has reached its lowest point of the night, and the dew has formed on the grass and on the backs of the sleeping animals and on the acacia leaves that will catch the first light when it comes. The zebra that is standing at the edge of the sleeping group has its eyes half open in the standing doze, one hemisphere deep in slow wave sleep, one processing the quiet signals of the pre-dawn landscape and finding nothing that requires the full arousal response. The night has been uneventful in the way that most nights on the Serengeti are uneventful, not because the predators were absent, but because the predators and the prey found the equilibrium that the long evolutionary relationship between them has always found most nights for most animals. The equilibrium will be disrupted somewhere on the plain tonight. It always is. The lion eats, and the zebra it eats is part of the system, and the system continues. But for this family group, in this part of the plain the night has passed without event, and the foal is still beside its mother, and the stallion is still at the periphery, and the stars are beginning to fade in the east, where the sky is lightening from black to the deep blue of the pre-dawn. The breathing of the herd, which has been a constant low presence throughout the night, the collective respiration of thousands of large mammals in the same section of the plain, is beginning to change as the first animals stir. A mare raises her head, an adult male shifts his weight. The stallion of the family group whose location the night has maintained walks a few steps and then stops, testing the morning air with his nose. The Serengeti is waking up. You do not need to wake up yet. The plain can do its waking without you. The herd can do its stirring. The sun can do its rising. The morning will arrive at the proper time, and you will arrive at it when you have finished with the rest that the night is still offering. Let the herd stir without you. Let the sun rise without you. You are in the last hour of the night's generosity. Receive it. The stripe in the pre-dawn is fading from silver to the familiar black and white of the day. The plain is still. The breathing continues. Let it carry you through to morning. Close your eyes if you like. Let the sound of this voice carry you somewhere quieter than wherever you are right now. There is a place in East Africa where the land is so flat that you can see the curve of the earth at the horizon, and where the late afternoon light turns the acacia trees into silhouettes of such perfect stillness that the whole landscape looks like it has been paused. In that light at that hour, a giraffe moves through the grass, and its movement has a quality that no other animal on earth produces. A slow, rolling, forward-leaning walk, the neck swinging gently with each step, the long legs folding and unfolding in a rhythm so gradual and so steady that watching it is like watching something drift rather than move. Let that image settle. Let the stillness of it come into wherever you are holding tension. Subscribe right now and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Hit that button. It costs you nothing, and it keeps this channel going. Drop a comment telling us where in the world you are watching from and what time it is. We read every single one. The giraffe is the tallest living animal on Earth. An adult male stands between 5 and 6 meters from the ground to the tips of his ossicones. the paired skin-covered horns that grow from the top of the skull and that, in large males, can reach 30 centimeters in length and accumulate calcium deposits over the years that make their tips bony and hard, 5 to 6 meters. The ceiling of a 2-story house, roughly. The height of a telephone pole. The height of most of the trees that the giraffe feeds from, which is the point. And which is the reason the giraffe became what it is. The neck alone accounts for approximately 2 meters of that height. It contains the same number of vertebrae as the human neck. 7, the same as almost all mammals, from the shrew to the whale. But each vertebra is elongated to a length that the equivalent human vertebra does not approach. The longest of the giraffe's cervical vertebrae can exceed 25 centimeters. The total neck length is a biological engineering project whose completion required approximately 12 million years of evolutionary pressure in the direction of height, and whose current state is a neck whose weight alone approaches 250 kilograms in large adults. The blood pressure required to push blood from the heart to the brain in an animal whose head is 6 meters above the ground is approximately twice the blood pressure of most other large mammals. The giraffe's heart, which weighs approximately 11 kilograms and is proportionally the largest heart of any terrestrial animal, generates a resting systolic pressure of approximately 280 millimeters of mercury, compared to the human normal of 120 millimeters. It must. The vertical distance between the heart and the brain is approximately 2.5 meters, and every millimeter of that distance requires additional pressure to overcome the gravity that is constantly pulling the blood column downward. The cardiovascular system has developed additional adaptations to manage the consequences of this pressure. The blood vessels of the lower legs are under extraordinary pressure from the weight of the blood column above them, a column that, in a standing giraffe, is several meters tall. To prevent the chronic edema that this pressure would produce in the tissues of the lower legs, the giraffe has evolved blood vessel walls in the lower extremities that are among the thickest relative to vessel diameter of any mammal, producing a natural compression system whose mechanism has been studied by the aerospace medicine research community for its potential applications in the design of pressure garments for fighter pilots who experience similar hydrostatic pressure challenges during high-G maneuvers. Let that settle too. The elegance of a biological solution to a problem so precisely defined that human engineers have looked to it for inspiration in the design of pressure suits worn in jet aircraft. The giraffe did not plan any of this. The giraffe's biology simply worked out, across millions of years of selection, the solution that the problem required. The tongue of the giraffe is approximately 50 centimeters long and darkly pigmented, ranging from deep blue-gray to near black at the tip. The pigmentation is believed to protect the tongue from the ultraviolet radiation to which it is exposed during the hours of foraging in the direct equatorial sun, because the giraffe's tongue, unlike the giraffe's belly and inner thigh, is in continuous direct sunlight during the full day of feeding that the animal's caloric requirements demand. The tongue is prehensile. It wraps around branches and pulls them toward the lips, with a dexterity that allows the giraffe to strip the leaves from a thorny acacia branch without the thorns contacting the lips or the tongue itself. The lips are also highly mobile and thickened at the edges, providing additional protection against the acacia's defenses. The acacia tree and the giraffe have been in a relationship long enough to have shaped each other. The acacia's thorns are as long as they are partly because of the giraffe. The acacia's leaf chemistry, the tannins it produces that make its leaves progressively more bitter and less nutritious as browsing continues, is a defensive adaptation that reduces the amount of leaf the giraffe takes from any single tree before moving on. And the giraffe has evolved around these defenses: the long tongue that avoids the thorns, the thick lips, the behavior of moving from tree to tree rather than stripping any single tree, and the habit of returning to previously browsed trees only after the tannin levels have returned to baseline. The two species have been pushing against each other for millions of years, and the result is a mutual shaping that neither could have produced without the other. The giraffe's feeding window is long. It spends between 12 and 14 hours per day browsing, because the leaf material it consumes is nutritionally dilute relative to the grasses that the herbivores around it are eating, and the caloric density of acacia leaves, while higher than most grass per unit weight. must be harvested at the rate that the continuous browsing maintains to meet the metabolic demand of an animal that may weigh up to 200 kilograms. The giraffe moves slowly through the savanna, pausing at each tree for the time it takes to strip the accessible branches clean before moving to the next. The movement has the quality of patience, not because the giraffe is patient in any cognitive sense, but because the biomechanics of the feeding strategy have selected for a behavioral pace that looks, from the outside, like deliberate calm. Let that pace come into your breathing, slow and steady, moving from tree to tree without urgency. The savanna is very quiet in the middle of the day when the sun is high and the predators are resting, and the giraffe is the only large animal still moving through the heat. The social structure of the giraffe is loose in a way that distinguishes it from most other large African herbivores. Giraffes do not form permanent herds with stable membership and defined hierarchies. They form temporary aggregations, groups of 2 to 20 animals that come together for periods ranging from hours to days and then dissolve, with individuals joining and leaving without the social disruption that the entry or departure of a member produces in more tightly bonded herds. The research on giraffe social behavior has characterized this as a fission-fusion society. The same social organization seen in chimpanzees, elephants, and dolphins, in which the basic social unit is the individual and the group is a temporary structure formed around shared resource access or mutual protection. Within this fluid social structure, the associations between individuals are not random. Long-term studies of marked giraffe populations have found that individuals preferentially associate with each other across months and years of observation, forming what the researchers have described as social bonds, whose persistence and whose behavioral expression, preferential proximity, coordinated movement, and the social grooming that is rare in giraffes and whose occurrence between bonded individuals carries more weight for that rarity, go beyond the simple coincidence of individuals using the same resources at the same time. The giraffe is not the solitary drifter that its loose social structure might suggest. It is an animal with relationships, maintained across the fluid membership of the larger aggregation. The giraffe sleeps in short installments. Total daily sleep time in wild giraffes has been measured at approximately 30 minutes to 2 hours per 24-hour period, the least of any mammal documented by the sleep research. The sleep occurs in brief episodes of 4 to 5 minutes, during which the giraffe may lie down with the neck curved back to rest the head on the hindquarters, a posture that requires the neck to support only its own weight rather than the full weight of the head and neck against gravity, or may sleep standing, with the eyes closed and the ears still rotating in response to sounds. The giraffe almost never lies down in the field, partly because the process of rising from a recumbent position takes approximately 30 seconds of vulnerable, slow movement that a predator can exploit, and partly because the giraffe's cardiovascular system manages the transition from lying to standing by a gradual pressure equalization that, if rushed, produces the same kind of orthostatic hypertension that causes humans to feel lightheaded when they stand up too quickly. You are not a giraffe. You have time to lie down. Let that thought be restful, the rare luxury of being able to close your eyes without the vigilance that the savanna demands of every animal that lives in it. The stillness you are in right now is a stillness the giraffe only experiences in the briefest of intervals. The calves of the giraffe are born after a gestation period of approximately 15 months, one of the longest gestations among the non-cetacean mammals, and they arrive into the world by falling. The mother giraffe gives birth standing, and the calf falls approximately 2 meters to the ground in the final stage of delivery, a fall whose impact stimulus is part of what triggers the calf's first independent breaths. The calf stands within hours of birth, typically within 30 to 60 minutes, in a process of increasingly coordinated attempts to fold the long legs in the correct sequence, find the center of balance that the giraffe's unusual proportions create, and push upward against gravity in an animal whose legs are already approximately the same length as those of a full-grown adult horse. The calf's height at birth is approximately 2 meters. It grows to its adult height by approximately 4 years of age, adding its remaining 3 to 4 meters of stature through the combined growth of the legs, the body, and the neck. in proportions that keep the animal balanced and functional at every stage of development. The neck grows at a rate that the biomechanics of the feeding strategy require. The giraffe that is not yet tall enough to access the upper canopy of the acacia feeds on the lower branches, and the access to the upper canopy that the adult height provides, is the resource that the growth trajectory is building toward. The mother's investment in the calf extends for approximately 16 months of nursing, during which the calf remains within close range of the mother and is defended against predators, with a kick whose force the research on giraffe defensive behavior has measured and found to be capable of killing a lion with a direct strike. The giraffe's primary defensive weapon is the kick, forward and downward with the front legs, or sideways and backward with the hind legs, and the force available in an animal of 200 kilograms, with legs of the length and the musculature that the giraffe possesses, is a force that the lion respects in the way that it respects the buffalo's horns and the elephant's size. By preferring the vulnerability of the young and the isolated over the confrontation with an animal that can kill it, let the image of the mother and the calf together in the early morning light be the last image you hold before you let go of the need to hold images at all. They are moving through the acacia woodland at the pace that 2 meters of neck and 15 months of maternal investment produce, steady, unhurried, each step placing the long legs carefully in the uneven ground. The giraffe's world is high and slow and very quiet. The neck sways with each step. The acacia trees are dark against the pale morning sky. Let yourself drift into that quiet. The giraffe's neck continues to move through the woodland, the long shadow of it stretching across the grass in the early light. There is no urgency here. The acacia leaves are plentiful, the predators are sleeping, and the air is cool enough that the day's heat is still hours away. The neck bends toward a low branch. The tongue extends, wraps and pulls. Somewhere in the distance, a bird calls once and then falls silent. The giraffe moves on. The ossicones on the top of its head catch the first direct light of the morning, a brief brightening, a moment of gold at the highest point of the tallest animal in the world, and then the acacia canopy closes over it, and the giraffe disappears into the green. The woodland is quiet. You are quiet. There is nothing required of you right now except to let the breathing slow and the body settle and the images grow softer and less defined as the sleep that the giraffe barely gets begins to find you instead. Let it come. The giraffe's relationship with the other animals of the savannah is one of mutual information exchange, in the way that all animals sharing a landscape develop a passive sensory network from each other's alarm responses and movement patterns. The giraffe's height is an information resource for the other animals around it. When a giraffe raises its head sharply from browsing and orients toward a direction, every zebra and wildebeest within sight of the giraffe reads that orientation as a potential alarm signal and adjusts its own vigilance accordingly. The giraffe is an involuntary sentinel for the smaller and lower-sighted animals of the savannah, and its height, which evolved for feeding, not for predator detection, has become a shared resource whose information value the other species of the ecosystem have learned to extract. The reverse flow of information also occurs. The giraffe attends to the alarm calls of the birds and the small mammals of the savannah, the alarm bark of the impala, the rattling call of the guinea fowl, the mobbing behavior of the hornbills, as signals about predator presence whose triangulation with its own elevated view of the landscape gives the giraffe a fuller picture of what is moving around it than either the bird call or the elevated view alone would provide. The sensory community of the savannah is a distributed detection network, and the giraffe is one of its highest elevation nodes. The giraffe's vision is remarkable in ways that the animal's height makes immediately functional. The eyes are large, among the largest of any terrestrial mammal, and positioned on the sides of the head in a configuration that provides a visual field approaching 360 degrees, with a narrow binocular zone in front and a nearly complete panoramic view of the surroundings through the monocular fields of each eye. From the height of 5 to 6 meters, this visual field covers an area of the landscape that a lion at ground level cannot see from the same location. The giraffe sees over the grass that conceals the crouching predator. It sees the movement at the edge of the tree line that the wildebeest at ground level cannot detect until the predator is already committed to the charge. The color vision of the giraffe has been found in the comparative research to be trichromatic, the same three-cone color vision system that humans possess, and the research on giraffe foraging behavior has found that the color discrimination that trichromatic vision provides is used in the selection of leaves at different stages of growth, since younger leaves are more nutritious and their color differs from mature leaves in the wavelengths that the giraffe's trichromatic system can distinguish. The giraffe that appears to be browsing indiscriminately is making color-based quality assessments of individual leaves at the resolution that 5 to 6 meters of height and trichromatic vision allow. The male giraffe's competitive behavior is called necking, and it is exactly what it sounds like: two males standing alongside each other and swinging their necks to deliver blows with the ossicones against the other male's flank, neck, and legs. The force available in a swing of a 250-kilogram neck is force enough to produce audible impacts that carry across 100 meters of open savanna, and the research on necking injuries has documented fractures, lacerations, and in the most intense confrontations, the loss of consciousness from blows to the head delivered by a rival's ossicone at the end of a full neck swing. The necking behavior has been proposed as one of the evolutionary drivers of the giraffe's long neck, not the feeding height advantage, which is the most widely cited explanation, but the competitive advantage in male-male combat that longer neck length provides. A longer neck generates more momentum in the swing and delivers the blow at a greater radius from the shoulder pivot, increasing the effective force of the impact. The males with longer necks win more necking contests, and the males that win more necking contests gain preferential access to females. The long neck is therefore not only a feeding tool, it may be at least partly a weapon, or a weapon's handle, whose length determines the weapon's power. The giraffes at a waterhole present one of the most visually distinctive behaviors of any large mammal, the drinking posture. To reach water at ground level, the giraffe must splay its front legs outward and lower its head in a movement that takes approximately 30 seconds and that leaves the animal vulnerable. The neck is lowered from its normal elevated position. The sightlines to potential predators are reduced, and the posture itself requires a few seconds of recovery to restore the standing stability that the normal position provides. The giraffe knows this. The research on waterhole behavior has found that giraffes approach water cautiously, spend extended periods assessing the surroundings before committing to the drinking posture, and frequently drink in the company of other giraffes whose upright vigilance compensates for the lowered vigilance of the drinking individual. The cardiovascular challenge of the drinking posture adds to its complexity. When the giraffe lowers its head from 5 meters above the heart to below the heart's level, the blood pressure that the heart generates to reach the elevated brain now operates in the reverse direction. The blood that was being pushed upward is now falling downward, and without the mechanisms to prevent it, this reversal would produce a dangerous surge of blood pressure in the head. The giraffe has evolved a rete mirabile, a network of fine blood vessels at the base of the brain, that absorbs the pressure surge by elastic expansion of the vessel walls, buffering the brain from the sudden pressure increase. It also has valves in the jugular vein that prevent the backflow of blood when the head is lowered. The drinking posture requires coordinating several independent cardiovascular mechanisms simultaneously, and the giraffe manages it as routinely as it does everything else, with the calm efficiency of an animal whose biology has had millions of years to work out the details. The giraffe population across sub-Saharan Africa has declined by approximately 40% over the past 3 decades, a reduction whose scale the conservation research has only recently begun to characterize with the systematic survey methodology that the continent's more charismatic species have attracted for much longer. The giraffe has been called the forgotten megafauna of the African conservation crisis, a species whose decline has occurred largely without the international attention that the elephant, the rhinoceros, and the lion have attracted, partly because the giraffe's population was never as reduced as those of the more threatened species, and partly because the giraffe's distribution across multiple African nations has made the coordinated monitoring and the coordinated conservation response more difficult to organize. The drivers of the decline include the habitat loss that affects all large herbivores of the African savanna, the conversion of wildlife rangeland to agriculture, the expansion of human settlement into previously wildlife-dominated landscapes, and the poaching for meat and for the giraffe's distinctive skin, whose pattern has a commercial value in the international wildlife product trade that the regulatory framework has been slow to address. The network of protected areas across the giraffe's range offers partial protection, but the giraffe's movement ecology, its wide-ranging behavior, and its use of landscapes that span the boundaries between protected and unprotected land means that protection within park boundaries provides incomplete security for a population whose seasonal movements regularly carry individuals into the unprotected areas adjacent to the parks. The pattern of the giraffe's coat is one of the most recognizable visual signatures in the natural world, and its biological function is less obvious than its visual impact. The irregular polygonal patches, dark brown to orange to almost black in some individuals, separated by the cream or white lines of the reticulation, are not random. Each individual giraffe carries a coat pattern that is as distinctive as a human fingerprint, and that does not change across the animal's lifetime except in color, as older animals tend to darken. The research on giraffe coat pattern variation has found that the pattern correlates with the temperature regulation of the animal's skin. The dark patches are underlaid by a complex network of blood vessels and specialized heat exchange structures that allow the giraffe to selectively heat and cool different regions of its body surface by increasing or decreasing blood flow to the skin beneath the patches. The pattern is, in part, a thermoregulatory map, a distribution of heating and cooling zones across the body surface that the giraffe manages through the vascular control of skin blood flow. In the heat of the East African midday, this system allows the giraffe to absorb solar radiation through the dark patches, while the light-colored reticulation reflects it, creating a pattern of differential heating across the skin's surface that the underlying vascular network converts into a thermoregulatory gradient. The research has found that the dark patches are significantly warmer than the light-colored reticulation lines during peak solar heating, suggesting that the vascular heat exchange beneath the dark patches is actively dissipating the absorbed heat into the blood and then to the respiratory system, where it is lost through the breath. The giraffe's coat pattern is therefore not only beautiful, it is a thermoregulation system whose elegance reflects the same millions of years of evolutionary refinement that produced the long neck and the reinforced blood vessel walls of the lower legs. The giraffe's voice is rarely used, and this rarity is itself informative about the animal's sensory ecology. The giraffe produces sounds, a range of vocalizations from the low-frequency hums that mothers use with calves to the alarm snorts and the occasional roar-like sounds produced in intense competitive or defensive contexts, but does so far less frequently than most large social mammals. The research on giraffe communication has proposed that the animal's height and visual acuity provide such an effective long-range sensory system that acoustic communication, which requires sound production and detection and is subject to masking by wind and ambient noise, is less necessary for the giraffe than for animals that cannot see as far. The giraffe communicates visually across the distances that its height makes possible and uses sound primarily for the close-range communication with calves and conspecifics that the visual channel alone cannot accomplish. The low-frequency vocalizations that the giraffe does produce are in a range that carries well through the dense vegetation of the savanna, the same frequency range used by the elephant for long-distance communication through both air and ground vibration. Whether the giraffe uses infrasound communication of the kind the elephant has been documented to use remains an active research question, and the acoustic monitoring studies that would be required to characterize any infrasonic component of giraffe communication have not yet been conducted with sufficient coverage of the giraffe's full vocal range. The giraffe may be communicating across greater distances and in ways whose complexity we have not yet characterized, through a sensory channel whose investigation awaits the research attention that the animal's more dramatic characteristics have historically drawn away from its subtler behaviors. The subspecies of giraffe, the number of which has been revised upward in recent years, as the genetic research has distinguished what was previously considered a single species into what some taxonomists now classify as 4 distinct species, occupy different regions of sub-Saharan Africa and differ in coat pattern, coloration, and the distribution of the ossicones in ways that the research has characterized as reflecting the different environmental pressures of the different ecosystems they inhabit. The reticulated giraffe of northern Kenya and Somalia, whose coat pattern consists of large, clearly defined polygons separated by narrow white lines, inhabits the drier thornbush ecosystems of the Horn of Africa region and carries a coat pattern whose larger patch size has been proposed to reflect the thermoregulatory demands of a hotter, drier environment than the Maasai giraffe's more irregular and more finely patterned coat. The Maasai giraffe of southern Kenya and Tanzania, whose irregular, jagged-edged patches give it a more complex pattern than the reticulated, inhabits the mixed grassland and woodland of the East African savanna and represents the population whose behavior and ecology the majority of the long-term giraffe research has characterized. The Nubian giraffe of Ethiopia and South Sudan, whose 2 ossicones in the male are flanked by a median knob between them, inhabits the acacia woodlands of the Nile watershed and is among the most endangered of the giraffe forms, with a population estimated at fewer than 3,000 individuals. The distribution of the giraffe across its range follows the distribution of the acacia trees that constitute the primary component of its diet, and this dependency has shaped the giraffe's relationship with the African landscape across the full history of the species' evolution. The acacia woodland and the giraffe have evolved together in the same ecosystem, and the giraffe's continued presence in that ecosystem is bound to the continued presence of the acacia in a relationship of mutual dependency that the habitat loss driving the giraffe's current decline is dismantling. The giraffe's role in the acacia woodland's ecology extends beyond the simple consumption of leaves. The giraffe is a seed disperser for the acacia. Its digestive system processes the seeds of the acacia pods that it consumes, and the seeds that pass through the giraffe's digestive tract and are deposited in the giraffe's dung are seeds, whose germination rate has been found in the research to be higher than seeds from uneaten pods, possibly because the digestive processing reduces the seed coat's resistance to imbibition of water. The giraffe moves through the woodland, consuming acacia pods across a wide range, and deposits the seeds in locations sometimes kilometers from the parent tree, contributing to the acacia's dispersal in the same way that the elephant contributes to the dispersal of the large-seeded tree species of the forest. The giraffe's movement across the landscape has been characterized by GPS collar studies as a wide-ranging pattern that connects multiple habitat patches across seasonal and annual cycles. Individual giraffes have been tracked moving more than 100 kilometers in the course of a year, crossing roads, rivers, and the boundaries between protected and unprotected land in a ranging behavior that the landscape-scale conservation planning must account for if the connected habitat that the giraffe's biology requires is to be maintained. The home range size of individual giraffes varies substantially with habitat quality. In the dense, productive acacia woodland